Here's why adrenal fatigue causes estrogen dominance. Okay, so this is super loaded because at perimenopause, it is common for both estrogen and progesterone to decline. So why is it that so many women at this stage of life are struggling with estrogen dominance? The reason is because your adrenals are pooped. So my mom was out a couple of weeks ago and we got to talking about this, and I had her in stitches by the time we were done. We were also, we were just out having a good time, and I kind of used a couple of examples that I'll use later on in this to share like why or how we become estrogen dominant at this stage of life. And like I say, I just had her in stitches. It was a lot of fun. All right. So first of all, your adrenals, you have two of them. They sit on top of your kidneys. So you have a left adrenal and a right adrenal, just like you have a left kidney and a right kidney. And the adrenal glands are responsible for making a lot of different hormones. We oftentimes think of adrenaline, we think of cortisol, we don't think of all of the other stuff that the adrenal glands actually make. And if you think of the adrenal glands kind of like an onion where it has layers, you have an adrenal cortex, you have an adrenal medulla, and each one of these layers, so the adrenal medulla actually releases the adrenaline, and the cortex releases the cortisol. So in addition to those, the adrenals also release DHEA, estrogen, progesterone, and a variety of other hormones that are involved in regulating blood pressure. Okay, so this is the renin angiotensin aldosterone system, RAAS. We won't get into that in today's conversation because I really want to dial this into the conversation around estrogen dominance. Now, the adrenals can in fact make estrogen. More commonly, what happens is the adrenals produce DHEA, and that gets converted by peripheral tissues, so other tissues within your body, from DHEA into estrogen. And we wind up in a state of estrogen dominance. The question is, why, oh, why do the adrenal glands produce the estrogen? Well, when the adrenal glands are stressed, which means if you are a person and you're living in the world today, raise your hand. You are stressed, okay? It's how society is built. And especially as women, we are not made to function as men. And yet society has set us up to be kind of, if we want to be functional members of society as society set up, then we have to. And here's where I'll get on my soapbox about hormonal birth control for just a sec. Hormonal birth control actually enables us to do that. So it's this thing that we put into our systems that make us better able to not feel those cyclical ups and downs that we should feel as a woman, and push our way through it, push ourselves to the limit more so than we should. And at some point we pay for it, typically perimenopause, menopause. Okay, step off my hormonal birth control soapbox for now. Back over to the question. Why are the adrenals producing estrogen? Like, why are they producing estrogen? Why are they producing DHEA? Here's the thing. You've got two glands up in your brain, hypothalamus, pituitary. There are lots of axes around this. So you may recognize HPO, hypothalamus pituitary ovary, HPA, hypothalamus pituitary adrenal. The hypothalamus sends a signal to the pituitary. That signal is a hormone, specific hormone, ACTH, says, hey, pituitary, like we need, actually, ACTH, I apologize. ACTH is produced by the pituitary. Oh, which hormone is it? It's another acronym. I believe it's got an R in there. Anyways, the hypothalamus produces a hormone that signals the pituitary to produce another hormone that tells the adrenals to make cortisol. Now, the problem is this particular hormone is not that specific. So what this hormone does is it goes down to the adrenals and it starts kicking them. It's like, hey, you adrenals, make us some stuff. And the adrenals, when they are fatigued, are unable to make cortisol. And so here they are, they're down there going, Uncle, I'll give you whatever you want, except I can't give you cortisol. But here's some stuff. And what they wind up giving is estrogen, adrenaline, and I mentioned that RAAS system that we're not going to get into a lot of, except to say this. They even produce some of the hormones in the RAAS system, and this is why a lot of people wind up with high blood pressure, is because they're actually struggling with adrenal fatigue. Their poor little adrenal glands cannot make cortisol. They can't meet the body's needs for cortisol. And so instead, the adrenals are giving what it can, which is adrenaline. And this is why you get the heart palps. This is why you get the hot flashes. This plays into the insomnia piece of it for a lot of women at this stage of life. This is also why you get the estrogen dominance, because when the adrenals can't make the cortisol, they can make the estrogen, they can make the DHEA, which then again gets converted, and in some people it happens faster than others, into estrogen. And so even if your DHEA is low and you've got estrogen dominance, you're like, yeah, but my DHEA is low. Well, that's because peripheral tissues are converting that DHEA to estrogen, or your adrenal glands are just pumping out the estrogen. Now, this is all what happens in a stressed state. These are the ones that emerge before you hit adrenal fatigue. So back when your adrenals can still make cortisol, this is also why this is like, so when we're talking adrenal fatigue, there are actually lots of stages of adrenal fatigue. Okay. Here, when I'm using the term adrenal fatigue, I'm talking about cortisol regulation specifically. And here's how cortisol should be regulated. Should, as in a healthy cortisol regulation. In the morning, at daybreak, your cortisol levels spike. That's the highest they are all day in healthy people. Highest they are all day. Maybe about 30 minutes to an hour after you wake, they're the highest they are in healthy people. Anyways, right around daybreak, your cortisol levels spike. This is what helps you get out of bed in the morning. So cortisol is actually a good thing. Then you eat breakfast, and then your cortisol levels kind of taper off pretty steadily throughout the day. They kind of fall in an S-shaped pattern. So from the peak, actually, it's not really an S-shaped pattern. They kind of, fall like coming down a pretty steep mountain. They kind of fall, gradually throughout the day. And then you've got some rolling hills at the bottom. Only this way you've got more like a flat slope. So it's like part of an S at the bottom of it. So they'll taper off towards bedtime, be at their lowest, about the time you go to sleep, stay low through the night. This is when melatonin rises. So cortisol and melatonin actually have an inverse pattern. When melatonin is spiking, cortisol is low. When melatonin is low, cortisol is spiking. Once again, this is to help you get up and go, and also to help you get ready for sleep. Okay, so that is what a healthy cortisol pattern looks like. In people with dysregulated cortisol, the cortisol pattern looks off. So either your cortisol isn't in the quote unquote normal ideal range at all of these times throughout the day, it's constantly high throughout the day, or in later stages of adrenal fatigue, it's always low. In early stages of adrenal fatigue, it really is that it's dysregulated. So it might be, on the low, a little too low in the morning, too high in the evening, when you're getting ready for bed. This once again contributes to insomnia. Now, where was I going with this? Oh, but at the later, okay, so back to later stage adrenal fatigue. In later stage adrenal fatigue, your cortisol levels are tanked, so they're low all the time. Now, this plays into lots of different things. This means that the body can't properly utilize thyroid hormone. This means that you're very prone to high blood pressure at this stage. This means that you are prone to high estrogen dominance at this stage. And once again, these are the estrogen is something that your adrenals are producing when they're under stress, when they're under duress. Now, progesterone, your adrenals actually produce progesterone. And surprisingly, there is new research that shows that it is actually an adrenal spike in progesterone that prompts ovulation, that prompts the surge in luteinizing hormone that we commonly think of as being the thing that prompts ovulation. It's not the luteinizing hormone, it's the progesterone release from the adrenals that allow ovulation. Progesterone, when we're talking hormone pathways, pregnenolone is kind of the parent hormone. It can get converted into cortisol. It can get converted into progesterone. I'll give you one guess which one's related to stress and which one's related to rest and digest. When you are stressed out, this is why women who are super stressed do not ovulate well. It's because they are not getting that spike in progesterone from the adrenal glands that prompts ovulation. Okay. That surge in luteinizing hormone is actually related to the release of progesterone from the adrenals. So this means when you have a cycle, like when you're in your healthy reproductive years, and you have a cycle where your luteal phase is defective in some way, and there are like 4 well-categorized types of luteal phase deficiency. There is also a 5th known type of luteal phase deficiency. And this is just where progesterone levels don't rise as they should, don't stay high for as long as they should during the luteal phase, that second half of the cycle. Okay. That all has to do with egg development during the first half and proper luteinization of that follicle at ovulation when LH spikes. But again, LH doesn't spike, luteinizing hormone doesn't spike unless there's an appropriate release of progesterone from the adrenal glands. Okay, so all of this ties into estrogen dominance. Now, how are we defining estrogen dominance? There are 2 ways to define estrogen dominance. The first way is in a 28-day cycle, the first half of your cycle is governed by estrogen, and the second half of your cycle is governed by progesterone. If you have a condition like PCOS, if you have a condition where for any reason you have really long cycles, say like, even if it's not PCOS, like 40 days, although PCOS is most common like 40 days or whatever, basically the long part of your cycle is the time up to ovulation. The time from the luteal phase of a cycle is very well defined. Healthy luteal phase is typically considered 9 to 16 days. Even with luteal phase deficiencies, that captures most luteal phase deficiencies. If you happen to have a really short luteal phase, it may be about 7 days. Still, that defines estrogen dominance because estrogen is the dominant hormone in that estrogen is, this doesn't mean necessarily that estrogen is high. This may mean that estrogen is tanked. It just means your progesterone levels are very, very low during this time. So the only detectable hormone during this time by urine, not by blood, we can get down lower, is estrogen. And so then you would be classified as estrogen dominant. The other way this might be is you have high estrogen levels all the time. And this again points to adrenal fatigue. It does not point to, got to watch my words here. It does not point to your liver struggling. It does not point to all of the other BS that people say about, oh, your estrogen, like you're struggling to detox estrogen. No, your adrenals are pooped and they cannot make cortisol at healthy levels despite all the things they're doing to try and do that. So you need to support your adrenals. Okay. You do not need a supplement that detoxes estrogen, especially not DIM. DIM is the number one way to wind up with worse thyroid problems. It is the number one way to catapult back into chronic UTI symptoms. It is the number one way, if you struggle with interstitial cystitis, to guarantee you're going to wind up with some interstitial cystitis problems. Do not use DIM under any circumstances. Okay. Now, if you have a history of like estrogen dominant, estrogen, why am I drawing a blank on the term? Why am I drawing a blank? Estrogen dependent. Another D word. Estrogen dependent cancers, and you are on something to suppress estrogen. Talk to your doctor about something other than DIM. I don't know whether doctors would use DIM. Talk to your doctor about something other than DIM. DIM is goitrogenic, which means it basically vies with iodine in the body. It is kind of, you can think of goitrogenic as anti-thyroid. You don't want that on board long term, and you don't want that on board at the levels that are in supplements. Okay, so I'll get off my soapbox about the DIM to circle back around to adrenal fatigue and estrogen dominance. If you've got PCOS, if you've got high estrogen all the time, these point to you've got a cortisol issue. PCOS points to you've got an insulin problem too. PCOS may point to you've got a thyroid problem. It definitely points to cortisol. Okay, so we need to support adrenal health, and adaptogens are not the answer. Most adaptogens actually lower cortisol levels. They do not do what they claim, the marketing things claim they do, which is if your cortisol levels are high, they raise it, or they lower it. And if your cortisol levels are low, they raise it. No, adaptogens by and large suppress cortisol production. So you don't want adaptogens either. So what do you do? Well, you reach out to me at hey@brandysearcy.com. You check out my free resource at brandysearcy.com. Brandy is the traditional spelling of brandy, like the drink that is with a Y. Searcy is SEARCY. And I'm your host here at Holistic Wellness. You'll also find me at Feel Better Than Fine. All right, that's a wrap for today. I'll catch you next time. Bye.